Hey, everybody, welcome to the next part in my series on the secret history of the world by F. Paul Wilson. Today I'm going to talk about The Tomb, and I'm trying to find my style, I think, for these videos. So I think what I'm going to do for this one is just sort of review this book first, and then I'll talk about how it ties in or what my thoughts are and everything with the whole Secret History of the World series. And I suppose that way, if anyone's only interested in the review, doesn't care about the other stuff, then you can just drop out after the review's over. With that said, let's talk about The Tomb by F. Paul Wilson. You can see here it says the author's definitive edition. And it does not say anything about Repairman Jack, but we'll get into that. This is the first Repairman Jack book. It introduces us to the character of Jack, who is a fix-it man. He's a guy that's living off the grid. People come to him with problems that nobody else can solve. And in this book, an Indian man, by which I mean a man from India, named Kasum. Not sure how to say his name. This man comes to Jack, says that his grandmother was mugged the previous night. A very important necklace was stolen. He wants Jack to find the mugger, retrieve the necklace by morning, and he asks Jack to kill the man that mugged his grandmother. Jack says no. So right off the bat, we learn Jack is not a killer for hire. At the same time, Jack's ex-girlfriend, Gia, calls him up. She doesn't want to, but she's desperate, so she calls up Jack because her aunt, Grace, is missing, and the police haven't been able to do anything. And so, as a last resort, she calls Jack and asks for his help in finding her Aunt Grace. So we have these two. He's already, right off the bat, we've met Jack. He's got two jobs. And as he works on these two jobs, we learn more about the character. And I should be saving that for after I finish the plot synopsis. He's working on these two jobs. Things get weird. The jobs sort of cross over, and he starts to get involved in something that's deeper and darker than he ever anticipated. How's that? How's that for a synopsis? All right, so right off the bat, I give this 5 out of 5 on Goodreads. I absolutely love this book. I love the character of Repairman Jack. As I said, he's one of those characters that lives off the grid. He's not as dark a character as the Andrew Vachss character Burke, or probably any Andrew Vachss character. But check out Andrew Vachss if you haven't read any of his stuff. He lives off the grid, but he does have friends. He has people that know what he does. There's a guy, Abe Grossman, who supplies him with weapons and things and is a sounding board. He probably knows more about Jack than anybody, at least about what Jack does. Jack has a father who's in the picture. He has a brother and sister. His mother is dead. His other friends and the people that are part of his circle know what he does, don't necessarily know everything, don't know as much as Abe. Gia, his ex-girlfriend, has a daughter, Vicky, who loves Jack. Jack loves Vicky. Gia, I don't think this is a spoiler, at one point in their relationship found out what Jack did. He was keeping that from her. And that's what led to their breakup. Jack's good at his job. We learn a lot about his past. We get his first official fix is in this story. We learn sort of what pushed him off the grid and why he does what he does, the code he lives by. So great character. Absolutely love this guy. And I mean, A lot of people must, because there's 16 or so books. I'm looking over at where I've got them. 16 or so books in the series. And as for this particular story, it is this of the 3 books that I've read so far in this video series, this is the most wordy. I don't know if that's the best way to put it. F. Paul Wilson goes full Stephen King. There's a lot, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but it's a very descriptive book. We get a lot of detail. We get a lot of background. We get a lot of just a lot of stuff. But it works. The book moves at a good pace. It's surprisingly not told in first person. It seems like the kind of thing that would be, but it's not. So we follow different characters around. Jack isn't always the focus. We see what other characters are doing, and we see good guys and bad guys and supernatural elements. This is part of the secret history of the world, and so there is darkness here. There is the unknown. It's 75% thriller, 25% horror. I don't know if I just came up with those numbers off the top of my head. You could read this as just a straight thriller, a Jack Reacher kind of thing, with the supernatural thrown in. Although the supernatural is a decent-sized part of it. But I think the supernatural could be lifted out, and it could... I mean, you'd have to make some changes to the plot, because... Small changes, just like almost aesthetic changes, and it could be a straight-ahead thriller. But it's not, so I don't know why I'm talking about that. There are some flashbacks to the 1800s, which are pretty interesting. Of course, they're all part of the story. And that's, I don't know, again, don't know why I need to bring that up. Anyway, this review is getting out of hand. That's essentially The Tomb, F. Paul Wilson, the first Repairman Jack book. Highly recommended. 5 out of 5 stars. This is the 3rd time I've read it. And having said that, if all you wanted was a review, you can end this video now, because now I'm going to get into the secret history of the world stuff. So, got to bring this up because this has the most updated list of things in the secret history of the world. In the last video, I talked about Reborn. Great book. And that book took place in 1968. So we've got some things, some stories that take place between Reborn and The Tomb. So we have a short story called Dat Te Vow. I think that's how you say it. I'm not sure. That takes place in March of 1968, basically the same time as Reborn. Then we have Jack Secret Histories, which takes place in 83. Jack Secret Circles, also 83. Jack Secret Vengeance, also 83. I believe those are the Young Repairman Jack books. And actually, in the last video, I talked about not being sure exactly how the timeline works, but I suppose, I mean, these have a date set, 1983, so I suppose we can extrapolate from that when the rest of everything else takes place. After that is a short story called Faces, takes place in 1988. Then we have Cold City, 1990, Dark City, 1991, and Fear City, 1993. These are Repairman Jack prequels. Some of his earliest fix-it jobs. I don't have these. I haven't read them. Otherwise, I would have read them and done videos before I did this one. But those are 3 novels. And then a short story, it looks like, called The Fix, or just Fix, set in 2004. It says with Joe Conrath and Ann Voss Peterson. something I'm interested in reading. I mean, I want to read everything, but I like Joe Conrath a lot. So that's all the stuff that takes place in the past that gives us actual dates, years anyway. So now we're at year 0 minus 3. So as I've said in the other videos, this is 3 years before the end of the world as we know it. We have the novel, Sibs, which takes place in February of year 0 minus 3. And then we reach the Tomb, which is the summer of year 0 minus 3. There's a small connection so far as I know. At the very end of Reborn, there are three or four little sort of vignettes, only a few sentences long each. One of them is a real world, because something happens at the end of Reborn that sort of has this effect on the world. So the first one is a real world thing, a guy watching something about Martin Luther King on the news. The third one is someone watching something about Robert Kennedy on the news. The fourth one mentions Dat Te Vau. Is that how I said it before? So I'm guessing that ties directly into the short story Dat Te Vau that comes right after Reborn. But the second one absolutely ties into the Tomb. It doesn't mention a name, but it mentions a one-armed Indian man doing a certain something. And Kusum, or however you say his name, the gentleman who hires Jack at the beginning of the book, is a one-armed Indian man. So direct tie between Reborn and the Tomb. Now, as far as author's definitive edition, the Tomb was originally published, I believe, in 1984. That's what the copyright in this book says. This edition is 2006, I believe. And there were some changes made to the book to keep it within this secret history of the world timeline. Again, I've mentioned this before in, I think, probably the introduction video. So I originally read a 1984 edition of this book, and Jack was watching movies on videotape, I believe. There was a lot of, I think he was using a messenger service, payphones, something. And in this, he's watching DVDs. He's using answering machines. There's a part about how Times Square has been cleaned up, which I believe happened after the original publishing of the book. So I would love to find an old copy of the book and read that again and see exactly what all the changes were. Because originally I thought it was just sort of aesthetic changes, like I said, to bring it up to date, just things like the DVDs and answering machines. But I think there may be a little bit more than that, again, because the Times Square thing takes up a paragraph or two. It's not just switching VHS to DVD. 3 letters. So, and there may be more to it, this being the author's definitive edition. As I said, it doesn't say Repairman Jack on here, and I think all the rest of the books say a Repairman Jack novel. Some of the places I looked at online also had this listed as the Adversary Cycle Book 3. But then other lists have whatever the next one on my pile is as Book 3. So maybe it's 2.5. I don't know. It's very confusing. Actually, if we look in here, it has a list of, in the front, other books by F. Paul Wilson. It has the Repairman Jack novels. And then under the Adversary Cycle, it does have the Tomb listed. So, I don't know. But And one of the things I learned after I finished this, I looked some stuff up online. Apparently, F. Paul Wilson wanted the name of this to be Rakashi. I'm guessing that's how it's said. That's something from the book. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but there is at least one edition of this book out there with that title, Rakashi. If I can find one that's not too expensive, I might pick one up just to have it. It'd be kind of cool to have an original edition, like just a paperback from 1984, have this edition, and then have the edition that's called Rakashi. The reason I think that's how it's pronounced is because Jack mishears somebody that says it and thinks they said, my gosh. So that's why I'm going with the kosh, because it sounds like gosh, so Rakashi. Yeah, so it definitely, obviously fits in. There's a reference to it in Reborn. So it ties directly into the adversary cycle that way-ish. But the adversary, assuming that the thing in the Keep and Reborn is the adversary, and that's the assumption I'm making so far, is not mentioned, is not present in this book at all. So there's just at this point in time just a tentative tie between this and the other books, the books in the adversary cycle, which makes me wonder why this is listed as part of the adversary cycle. I don't think I missed anything. I mean, this is the third time I've read it. Yeah, I don't think there's any real deep ties at this point between Repairman Jack and The Keep and Reborn, which are absolutely knotted together, those two books. So yeah, that's book 3 in my reading of The Secret History of the World. Always been a fan ever since I read it the first time. Did not mind having to read it again. The next group, you know what? I'm going to grab my phone because I have the list on here of the books that I'm reading for this somewhere. I actually just took a picture of it on my phone from the computer. So the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's just a bunch of Repairman Jack books before I get back to the books that are actually labeled the Adversary Cycle. And the next 3 I have read before. Just once each. But now that I'm actually reading these through pretty quickly, relatively quickly, I'm reading a book or two in between each one to cleanse my palate. So now that I'm reading them relatively close together and looking for those connections, looking for anything that might tie them all together, we'll see. We'll see how the second read-through goes. And the next one is, where to go? Legacies. So, yeah, let's double check that. I'm sure you're all happy to have me looking at stuff down here. I'm looking in the wrong spot. I got to look in this book. That's got the list in the back with the timeline. All right, The Tomb, bunch of short stories, and then Legacies. Yep. All right, so that's what's coming up next. I guess that's it. I don't know what else to say, except whether or not you're going to follow along, whether or not you care about The Secret History of the World, F. Paul Wilson's whole big deal, I still highly recommend The Tomb. Absolutely a 5 out of 5 book. A great thriller, some great horror in it. It's just good stuff. So that's it for this Secret History of the World video. So until next time. Oh, crap. How could I forget? Pardon my language. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put them in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just be polite and post a spoiler warning. So if you want to know more about this, and how it ties in, although I think I covered that since it doesn't really tie in much. But if there's anything you want to talk about, that's what the comments below are for. Please like, share, and subscribe. And now that's it. So until next time, read more books.